This portion of Lee Pitts Live is brought to you by Hodges University, educating the leaders of our community for over 20 years.
Good morning, Southwest Florida. Welcome back to the award-winning Lee Pitts Live, of course. I'm your host, Lee Pitts, and you're kind of looking around saying, where are we? What's going on? Well, Lee Pitts Live is out in the field. We're traveling around in the community from time to time in 2015, so you'll see us out and about. We're here at First Assembly Cornerstone Ministry on Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard here in the city of Fort Myers, one of the preeminent churches in this community, and we have the pastor here of the church who's a leader in the community, and we're glad to welcome him to the studio, to his own church. Pastor Gregory Ford, the author of The Journey from No Man to God's Man. First of all, thanks for hosting Lee Pitts Live here at First Assembly.
You're welcome, and we're honored to do it.
Tell us what is, before we get going, tell us a little bit about First Assembly.
Well, First Assembly is, First Assembly Cornerstone is one of the striving churches in this community. We're on the cutting edge, and we're impacting this community in ways to empower our people, not only on the spiritual level, but educationally, financially, to build up a community of people who are very strong, and striving for success.
Okay. Now, when I was reading your book right here, the Journey from No Man to God's Man, Gregory Ford, I learned a lot about you, and when I was reading, I was saying, now that's the reason I will not write a book. People keep telling me to do a book. I got some stuff in my head, but man, you really just kind of just opened up to people, and I just think when I put the book down after I was done with it, I was really inspired by the book. I was encouraged. I was at some points it was suspenseful. There was tears. There was family. There was unity. There was love. Tell us what your approach to what you were trying to bring out in the book.
Well, the book it talks about my journey, like the name, the title of the book, and it talks about my getting from small places to great places. And a lot of time when people look at you, they look at preachers, they look at us in our finished product. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't come through a lot, but they don't never hear your story. So therefore, I wanted to lay out in a book the story about Greg Ford. The Greg Ford that was the no man, the Greg Ford that was not so up to par. You know what I mean? Right. Dysfunctional, troubled kid, in and out of trouble with drugs, and did a lot of things that other people probably wouldn't think the preacher had done. But the no man era, was a time where, hey, I dropped the ball, prison, jail, train accidents and all different kind of things happened in my life. Disobedience, was like a major aspect of who I was, but it worked.
Right. I want to go back to when you were on the brink of death, and the fact that you're even sitting here today is a miracle, you would say, right?
Yes.
But let's go to the whole idea of you coming to grips with, I want to reveal this, I want to do my book. How did that come about?
Because I always believe that people need to hear something in the form of a testimony to empower them to believe and have hope. Even though your beginnings may be small, very, dysfunctional or whatever, but there's hope at the latter end, and there's a lot of parents who have given up on their sons or their daughters because of some of their history or their track record that probably took them through jail and crack or bad events. But even with that, God can rewrite the end of that book. Come on, if the person will line up and find their hope in Him.
I got you. Now, what has been the response from I know you've been moving around here throughout Florida and other places to start to talk about the journey. What has been the response from people to your book and to your testimony?
Well, I'm telling you, everybody that I've talked to and that have read the book said that once they began reading the book, they were not able to put it down until they finished it, mm-hmm. because it kept their attention. They wanted to move to the next episode, the next era. They wanted to find out what was coming up next, because my life had a lot of twists, turns,
right.
and different things going on. So
are people extremely surprised? I know I was about you having been incarcerated, your drug dealing, and the whole piece. Do you find that people saying, "Wow, I never knew that about about Pastor Ford.
Well, yeah, because people don't know that the power of God is able to turn messes into miracles still.
Mm-hmm.
And though you could come through some very rough past, it doesn't mean that your future is not going to be bright. It does mean that you have to have some supernatural or divine intervention, but yet it can be better.
Mm-hmm. The when people walk away from having read your book, or they get to having read your book, what do you hope that they will take from the book, particularly young black men?
Well, young black men, I want to know, hey, devastation and failure is not the end. Okay, even though you may hit rock bottom, and you may blow out, and you may do things sometimes that's not, you don't want to share with a lot of people, and you're embarrassed about what had happened. I said, but yet and still, there is a way to make it where you could get back on your feet. There's hope in this book. There's more people like to use I like to talk about the Joseph journey. You know what I mean? Joseph's journey was from the pit to the palace, but mine was more likely from dysfunctional, come on here, to functional.
Now, when I was reading the book, one of the things that was jumping out to me, I was saying, this sounds like a movie. I know that could be down the road as you continue to promote the book, but has anybody else said that to you after reading the book?
Yeah, I'm getting that a lot. Matter of fact, some of us said, well, we need to send this to certain ones, and I said, well, hey, go ahead, open the door for the blessings. But my thing is, I think the story talks about, hey, you can recover from a great fall. I think that if anybody needs to know anything out of this book, that you can recover from a great fall.
Now, we have some contact information on the screen where people can reach out to you, go to your website, they can call that phone number to get the book. And the book, if they go through that process, how quickly can they get the book in their hands?
Well, there are several ways you can get the book. First of all, go to our website, to Gregory Ford International Ministries.org. You can go there and purchase the book there. Either you can go to our Facebook page, it'll link them right back to our website. And then you can Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Books A Million, they also have it on their website.
Is that kind of cool when you go into those places and you see your book on the shelf, or Barnes and Noble, Amazon? That's pretty cool, isn't it?
That is very cool. I love it. But first it was like, bam, thank you, Lord, I arrived. No, I haven't got there yet, but I'm still moving. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Turning Point. That when I got to Turning Point, that's early on in the book, but it seemed like that was, I don't want to spoil it, but just kind of capsulize Turning Point. The title itself says something about when you...
Turning Point, when I was 11 years old, when my father had a massive stroke. He came home. Matter of fact, I didn't know that the doctors had actually given up on him, and that they allowed him to come home and spend his remaining moments of days with us. And so we was welcoming him home, because we thought Dad is home and it's gonna be okay. So we sat home that night on a Monday night and watched Gunsmoke. My daddy was a Gunsmoke fan.
Yeah, mine too.
He loved Gunsmoke and Festus. Yeah. So he sat there and watched that night, and he watched that show. And he said, Greg, when the show was over, he said, take me to bed. So I walked him. I'm 11 years old walking my dad. He was fragile, a very strong man at one time, but because of the 2 weeks he'd gone through all this attack on his body, he was very fragile. But I helped him to the room, and I helped him sit by his bed. He said, Greg, go get me some water. I need to, take my medicine, before I go to bed. And so by the time I went to walk out of the room, my dad fell back on the bed and had a massive heart attack right there in my presence.
That was something, man.
I watched that, and I touched him, and I saw his eyes go back, and I'm 11 years old. I've never been in a situation where I've seen trauma on this level. So therefore, I didn't even really know how it affected me, until many years later, because from that moment, and for 10 years, I went on this roller coaster ride full of anger, depression, just upset because I lost my father, number one, and then the way it had happened, and then the effects of how it affected my life, because I just went spiral down. I was something else.
Let me have you read an excerpt from your book, if you will.
Yeah, I would like to go there. If you. I want to go to the part where I'm in the jailhouse, in the prison.
Okay.
Waiting to go and do 18 months in prison. This is when the Lord came and visited me in the room. It says, in this dream, I had come to realize that the vision from God, an out-of-body encounter, I saw a picture of myself, the broken down Holly Rock. I was dirty, skinny, and drugged out. I was wearing no shirt and a pair of shorts, pants, and a belt that looped on one side and stretched across on the other side because I was so small. He said this was the only way to keep my size 28 waist pants up on my pants without falling down. My lips were chapped and white, and the hair looked as if it had not been combed or brushed for weeks. It had looked like I hadn't taken a bath or a shower in days, and there I stood in the road that encircled, amen, the complex. And I crossed the street heading north between building B and C. This is in River Park Apartments in Naples, Florida. Mm-hmm. And as I crossed the street heading north between the buildings B and C to the old place of my former activities before I was arrested, in this scene, I was leaning on an old abandoned car in the parking lot and what looked like it had been a church, because when I in this vision, I saw these people like an outside church with no walls, mm-hmm. and I'm standing there looking at them. Wow. And so, but these people were seated in rows and looking toward the front, and as they was gathering, I just saw eye contact with an individual, and I could probably just tell you because without reading it, but I had this eye contact with an individual, but we just looked at each other for about maybe 5 seconds, and we kept on going. And I began to walk down between this alley. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, how in the world did I get here? Mm-hmm. A moment ago, I was in a jail cell waiting on child time. I was waiting to eat child. And now I'm here in this. And said, now wait a minute, I'm supposed to be in jail. I remember a minute ago, it's laying in a bunk. And now all of a sudden, I'm here. Now wait a minute, this ain't real. Mm-hmm. I said, now how I got out of that jail? Because everything was actually like this, like my life had been just flipped, and I was on another scene, and I got back to an old place, and I'm saying, now how am I gonna get back in that jail? Because I knew if I didn't get back in that jail by the time they served child or did count, man, they're gonna get me for escape, right? And I'm gonna be gone for many years. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh God, how can I get back in before they count? How can I get back in before, they serve child? And man, that moment was the moment when I was trapped. I couldn't get out. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And God, that's when my conversion came, because after it was sometime later, they woke me up in that room. And I was so glad to be in that jail when they woke me up, that they said, we've been waiting on you. We've been out here waiting on you. Come sit down. It's been 20 minutes and you haven't come out yet. And so I had been in that actual vision, out-of-body experience for quite some time. And so when I came out of that, man, they woke me up. I was so glad to be in that jail. I laid on the floor. I kissed the floor. I kissed the walls. Because, Lord, I said, whatever you're doing, I don't want to go there no more. I don't want to do that no more. Whatever. I said, whatever you're trying to show me. I called my mom. My mom was a very prophetic woman. Wow. A very woman that was very close to God. Amazing. She explained to me exactly what had happened. She said, God was giving you an opportunity. He was showing you that if you go back to that old life, living again, selling the drugs, doing whatever you did, he said you're going to be trapped there. You were not going to have access into a new beginning. And I did not want that. So I chose that moment to give God the rest of my life, and it's been 27 years now.
Fascinating book, man. Fascinating experience. We could talk about this all day long. I couldn't put the book down. I encourage everybody to go out and buy this book right here, The Journey from from no man to God's man. It's a great read, probably going to be a bestseller. We're proud to have Pastor Gregory Ford in our community. If you join us on YouTube as well, just go to all that contact information and hit Pastor Ford up.